The morning sun streamed through the massive viewing windows of Harmony Point Academy, casting long shadows across the polished metal floors. Students from dozens of different worlds hurried through the corridors, their various forms creating a colorful parade of alien life. Some walked on legs, others floated, and a few rolled along on mechanical devices. Danny Sullivan moved quietly through the crowd, keeping his head down as usual. He was average height for a human with brown hair, and simple clothes that helped him blend into the background. Most students barely noticed him as he slipped past, which was exactly how he liked it. The academy was the most important military school in the galaxy. Young beings from every major species came here to learn about war, peace, and everything in between. Danny had been here for 8 months now, and he still felt out of place among all the brilliant alien minds. He reached classroom 7, just as the warning bell chimed. Inside, 30 students had already taken their seats. The room was designed to accommodate different body types, with various sized chairs, floating platforms, and environmental pods for species that needed special atmosphere. Danny took his usual spot in the back corner, next to the large tank, where Nebula floated in her purple gas cloud. She was a Nebulan, one of the gas-based life forms from the outer rim. Her thoughts reached him through the translator device attached to her tank. "Good morning, Danny. Did you finish the reading assignment?" "Barely," Danny whispered back. "Math was never my strong subject." Across the room, the tall, crystalline form of Crystal caught the light and threw rainbow patterns on the walls. The Vectari student was already reviewing notes on her datapad, her crystal surface flickering with different colors as she processed information. Near the front, Zoc clicked his mandibles while organizing his materials with 4 different arms. Commander Lisa Martinez entered the room with her usual confident stride. She was a career military officer, with gray streaks in her black hair and eyes that had seen too many battles. Her uniform was perfectly pressed, and her posture showed years of discipline and training. "Good morning, class," she said, her voice carrying easily to the back of the room. "Today we continue our study of significant battles that changed the course of galactic history." The students settled down quickly. Commander Martinez had a reputation for being tough but fair, and everyone respected her knowledge. "As you know," she continued, "we have been examining conflicts where small forces overcame overwhelming odds through superior tactics, courage, or simple luck. Today we will look at one of the most unusual battles of the Ravager War." Danny felt his stomach tighten. The Ravager War had ended only 5 years ago, but the memories still haunted many worlds. The Ravagers were a species that believed in conquest above all else. They had swept through the outer colonies like a plague, destroying everything in their path. Commander Martinez activated the holographic display in the center of the room. A 3-dimensional image of a star system appeared with planets, moons, and space stations clearly marked. "The Battle of Kepler's Edge," she announced. 3 years ago, a Ravager fleet of 15 heavy cruisers attacked the mining colony of New Montana. The colony had no military defenses except for a single patrol ship and a few security officers. The hologram zoomed in to show the planet's surface. It was a rough world with deep valleys and high mountains, perfect for mining operations but terrible for defense. 12,000 civilians lived on New Montana, Martinez continued. When the Ravagers arrived, the only choice was evacuation. But the transport ships needed time to load everyone safely. Zoct H raised one of his 4 arms. "Commander, why did the Ravagers not simply destroy the transports as they tried to escape?" "Excellent question," Martinez replied. "The answer lies in what happened next." She pressed another control, and the hologram changed to show grainy video footage. The image was black and white, clearly taken from a great distance by some kind of surveillance drone. What you're about to see was recorded by automated defense satellites. The footage was classified for 2 years while military analysts tried to understand what they were watching. The video began to play. It showed the surface of New Montana with several Ravager dropships landing near the main settlement. Insect-like vehicles began pouring out of the ships, along with hundreds of Ravager soldiers in their distinctive black armor. The Ravagers landed a full assault force, Martinez explained. Their plan was simple: capture the mining facilities and used the human workers as slaves. They did not expect any significant resistance. The video quality was poor, but everyone could see the Ravager forces spreading out across the landscape. They moved in perfect formation, like a swarm of deadly insects covering the ground. Then something changed. A small figure appeared on the screen, moving between the rocky outcroppings near the mining complex. It was hard to make out details, but it looked like a human in some kind of powered armor. At this point, Martinez said, a single defender engaged the entire Ravager ground force. Crystal's crystal form shimmered with disbelief. Commander, surely one soldier could not fight so many enemies. Watch and decide for yourself, Martinez replied. The figure on the screen began to move. Even through the grainy footage, everyone could see that this was not normal human movement. The armored form darted between cover points faster than seemed possible, appearing and disappearing like a ghost. Explosions began lighting up the screen as Ravager vehicles suddenly erupted in flames. The neat formation of enemy soldiers broke apart as they tried to respond to attacks coming from seemingly everywhere at once. The engagement lasted 6 hours, Martinez narrated as the footage continued. During that time, this single defender eliminated over 300 Ravager soldiers and destroyed 47 vehicles, including 6 heavy assault mechs. Nebula's thoughts reached Danny through her translator. This cannot be real footage. No organic being could move like that. On the screen, the armored figure leaped impossible distances, landed on top of moving vehicles, and seemed to predict enemy actions before they happened. Weapon fire that should have been fatal somehow missed by inches, as if the defender could see the future. The fighting gave the transport ships enough time to evacuate all 12,000 civilians, Martinez continued. Not a single non-combatant was lost during the evacuation. The footage showed the final moments of the battle. 3 massive Ravager dreadnoughts had landed and were advancing on the lone defender's position. The armored figure stood on a rocky outcrop surrounded by the burning remains of destroyed vehicles. At this point, Martinez said quietly, the defender was completely cut off. With no ammunition left and facing impossible odds, the 3 dreadnoughts opened fire simultaneously. The screen went white with the intensity of their weapons. When the light faded, there was nothing left but melted rock and twisted metal. The defender was listed as missing in action, Martinez concluded. His identity remained classified, known only as Guardian of Kepler's Edge in official reports. The classroom was completely silent. Even the usually talkative Zoc had stopped clicking his mandibles. Everyone stared at the frozen final image of the holographic display. This battle changed how the galaxy views human combat capabilities, Martinez said. It also marked the beginning of the end for the Ravager expansion, as other species realized that humanity would fight to the death to protect innocent lives. Danny felt 30 pairs of alien eyes looking in his direction. They always did that when stories about human warriors came up. It made him uncomfortable, as if they expected him to explain his entire species. The lesson here, Martinez continued, is that sometimes one person with enough determination can change the course of history. The Guardian of Kepler's Edge saved 12,000 lives and showed the galaxy that humans will never surrender when protecting those they care about. She paused the display and looked around the classroom. Are there any questions about the tactical aspects of this engagement? Danny raised his hand slowly. His voice was quiet, barely louder than a whisper. That's me. The words hung in the air like a physical presence. Every conversation stopped. Every movement ceased. Even the soft hum of Nebula's life support system seemed to pause. Danny Sullivan sat in his chair, looking exactly like the quiet, unremarkable human student they all knew. His clothes were still simple. His hair was still messy from sleeping. Late. His face showed no pride or boasting, just a calm statement of fact. The silence stretched on, till it became almost painful to bear. The silence in the classroom stretched for what felt like forever. Danny Sullivan sat in his usual spot, looking completely normal and ordinary. His brown hair was still messy, his clothes were still simple, and his expression was calm. He did not look like someone who had just claimed to be a legendary war hero. Then Crystal began to laugh. her crystalline body shimmered with bright colors as musical sounds came from her translator. The laughter was not mean, but it was clearly disbelief. Within seconds, several other students joined in. Zack clicked his mandibles in what passed for chuckling among his species. "Danny," called out Rexstar, a large reptilian student from the front row, "that is a good joke. But we all know you are terrible at combat training." More laughter filled the room. It was true that Danny struggled with many of the physical requirements at the academy. During weapons training, he was always average at best. In hand-to-hand combat classes, he got thrown around by students half his size. His test scores in tactical planning were barely passing. Danny did not laugh along with everyone else, just sat there quietly waiting for the noise to die down. His eyes had changed somehow, though none of the students noticed. There was a depth there that had not been present moments before. Like looking into deep water, Commander Martinez watched the scene carefully. She had been teaching for 15 years and had learned to read her students. Something about Danny's reaction bothered her. There was no anger at being laughed at, no embarrassment at making such a wild claim. He just looked ... patient, like someone who was used to not being believed. "All right, settle down," Martinez said firmly. The laughter gradually stopped as students returned their attention to the front of the room. "Danny," she said, keeping her voice neutral, "that is quite a claim. The Guardian of Kepler's Edge is considered one of the greatest warriors in recent history. Do you have any proof of this statement?" Danny was quiet for a moment. Then he reached into his bag and pulled out a small metal object. It looked like a damaged piece of armor plating, scorched black on one side. "This is from the chess piece," he said simply. "I kept it after they pulled me from the wreckage." He tossed it gently to Commander Martinez, who caught it and examined it closely. Her face went pale as she recognized the design. It was definitely human military armor, but not any standard issue she knew about. The metal was some kind of advanced composite that had clearly been through extreme heat and stress. "This could be from any battle," Crystal said, though the voice was less certain than before. "Could be," Danny agreed, "but it is not." Martinez turned the armor fragment over in her hands. There were markings on it that looked like serial numbers, partially melted but still visible. She made a mental note to check these against military records later. "Class dismissed," she announced suddenly. "We will continue this discussion tomorrow. Danny, please remain behind." The students filed out slowly, many of them glancing back at Danny with curious expressions. Ebula floated past his desk and spoke through her translator. "I hope you are not in trouble, Danny. Even if you are not the Guardian, you are still our friend." "Thanks, Neb," Danny replied quietly. When the room was empty except for Martinez and Danny, the commander moved to sit in the desk beside him. Up close, she could see things she had missed before. Small scars on his hands that looked like they came from handling weapons. The way he sat perfectly still without fidgeting, like someone used to waiting for long periods. His eyes, which seemed much older than his 21 years. "Danny," she said carefully, "I need you to understand something. Claiming to be the Guardian is not a small matter. That person is a hero to billions of beings across the galaxy. If this is some kind of joke or cry for attention, now is the time to admit it."
"Oh."
Danny looked directly at her for the first time since she had known him. His gaze was steady and calm. "I understand, Commander. I am not joking. Then tell me what really happened at Kepler's Edge." Danny was quiet for a long moment, as if deciding how much to reveal. "I was 17, he finally said. "My family lived on New Montana. My father worked in the deep mines, and my mother ran a small medical clinic in town. I had a younger sister named Katie, who was only 12. His voice remained steady, but Martinez noticed his hands clench slightly. When the Ravager ships appeared in orbit, everyone knew what it meant. He had heard stories from other colonies that were attacked. The Ravagers do not take prisoners. They take slaves if you are useful. And they kill you if you are not, so you enlisted to fight them. "It's not exactly," Danny said with a small smile. "I lied about my age and stole a prototype armor suit from the defense depot. The guards were busy with evacuation procedures, so no one noticed one scared kid breaking into the equipment storage." Martinez felt a chill run down her spine. She was beginning to believe him. The armor was experimental, Danny continued. It was designed to boost human reflexes and strength to superhuman levels. But it had never been properly tested. The scientists said it might kill whoever wore it. But you put it on anyway. My family was going to be on the last transport ship, Danny explained. Someone needed to buy time for the evacuation. The regular defense forces were already dead. Or running. It was either try the armor, or watch everyone I loved die. He paused and looked out the window at the stars beyond. I do not remember much about the actual fighting. The armor had combat drugs that kept me going, but they also messed with my memory. I remember flashes, explosions, running, the sound of Ravager weapons firing. Mostly I remember being very, very angry. What about the impossible movements we saw in the footage? The way you seemed to predict enemy actions? Danny shrugged. The armor had sensors that could detect incoming projectiles and suggest movement patterns. Plus, when you are pumped full of combat stims, everything else seems to move in slow motion. You have plenty of time to think about where to go next. Martinez studied his face carefully. Everything he said matched what military analysts had theorized about the Guardian's capabilities. But she needed more proof. Danny, if you really are the Guardian, there should be records. Military files, medical reports from after the battle. Something I was listed as missing in action, Danny said. Presumed dead. It took 3 days for rescue teams to dig me out of the rubble where those dreadnoughts buried me. Official reports were already filed. I was just another casualty of war. But surely someone recognized you during your recovery. Danny smiled sadly. Commander, have you ever seen someone after they have been in combat for 6 hours straight? Pumped full of drugs, and then buried under tons of melted rock? I looked like a piece of burnt meat when they found me. It took 2 months of medical treatment before I looked human again. Martinez felt pieces of the puzzle clicking into place. The military often lost track of individual soldiers during major battles. Records got mixed up, reports were filed incorrectly, and heroes sometimes slipped through the cracks. So you recovered in secret and never told anyone who you were? What was the point? Danny asked. The civilians were safe. The Ravagers were defeated. Making myself famous would not bring back the people who died. I just wanted to go back to being normal. Then why are you here at the academy? Danny was quiet for a long moment. Because I realized something during that battle. I am good at breaking things and hurting people. Really good. But I do not want to be just a weapon for the rest of my life. I came here to learn how to protect people without having to kill anyone. Martinez stared at this young man who spoke so casually about superhuman combat abilities and life-changing battles. If he was lying, he was the best actor she had ever met. But something in his voice and his manner convinced her he was telling the truth. Danny, if you really are the Guardian, this changes everything. The Academy needs to know. The military needs to know. I figured they would find out eventually, Danny said quietly. I just hoped it would take longer. Martinez looked at the scorched armor fragment still in her hands. Tomorrow, she would run every test she could think of to verify Danny's story. She would check military databases, contact old colleagues, and dig through classified files. But deep down, she already knew what she would find. The quiet, unremarkable student sitting beside her was one of the most famous warriors in the galaxy. And somehow, that made perfect sense. 3 days passed after Danny's shocking claim in Commander Martinez's classroom. The story had spread through the academy like wildfire, but most students still did not believe it. Danny Sullivan, the quiet human who borrowed notes and apologized for taking up space, could not possibly be the legendary guardian of Kepler's Edge. Danny tried to continue his normal routine. He attended classes, studied in the library, and ate his meals in the corner of the cafeteria where no one bothered him, but he could feel eyes watching him wherever he went. Students whispered when they thought he could not hear them. Commander. Martinez had spent those 3 days running every check she could think of. The armor fragment Danny had shown her was real, advanced human military technology that matched no known production models. The serial numbers, partially melted as they were, had led her to classified files that made her hands shake as she read them. But she had not shared her findings with anyone yet. If Danny really was the Guardian, That information needed to be handled very carefully. On the fourth day, everything changed. Danny was in advanced tactics class when the emergency alarms began to sound. Red lights flashed throughout the academy, and the automated voice system announced a security lockdown. All students report to designated safe zones immediately. This is not a drill. The classroom erupted in confusion as 30 students from different species tried to understand what was happening. Through the large windows, they could see small ships approaching the station, ships that did not belong to any academy fleet. Professor Carolyn, elderly Vectari, with decades of military experience, quickly took control of the situation. Crystal form flashed urgent colors as he spoke. Everyone remain calm. Move in groups to Safe Zone 7. Stay together and do not separate for any reason. The students filed out of the classroom in an orderly fashion, but Danny could see the fear in their faces. Harmony Point Academy was supposed to be neutral territory, protected by treaties signed by every major government in the galaxy. No one attacked schools as they moved through the corridors. Danny noticed things that the others missed. The emergency lighting was wrong. Some sections were darker than they should be, which meant the power grid was being tampered with. The security doors that should have automatically locked during an emergency were standing open. Someone had disabled the station's defense systems from the inside. This was not a random attack. This was carefully planned. The group reached Safe Zone 7, which was really just a large assembly hall with reinforced walls. Hundreds of students and faculty members were already there, along with station security officers who looked worried and confused. Commander Martinez found Danny in the crowd and pulled him aside. "Danny, I need you to know something. I checked your story. Everything you told me is true. You really are the guardian of Kepler's Edge." Danny nodded quietly. "Figured you would find out eventually." The attacking ships belong to a group called the Red Claw Pirates. They are not here by accident. 3 hours ago, they sent a message demanding the surrender of all high-value prisoners and military personnel. High-value prisoners, diplomatic officials, military officers, anyone who might be worth ransom money. Danny, there are representatives from 12 different governments here for the Peace Summit. If the pirates capture them, it could restart wars that ended years ago. Danny understood immediately. Harmony Point Academy was not just a school, it was also a meeting place for diplomats and military leaders from across the galaxy. The Peace Summit that had been going on for the past week involved some of the most important people in known. Space and explosion echoed through the station, making everyone in the safe zone jump. The lights flickered, and dust rained down from the ceiling. "How many pirates?" Danny asked quietly. Martinez checked her datapad. Station sensors detected. "At least 200 before they were disabled. They have heavy weapons and military-grade armor. Our security force has maybe 30 officers, and most of them are trained for crowd control, not combat." Another explosion, closer this time. Some of the younger students began to cry, while others tried to comfort them. The security officers were talking rapidly into their communication devices. But Danny could tell from their expressions that they were not getting good news. "Where are the diplomatic officials now?" Danny asked. "Conference room Alpha, 3 levels up." It was supposed to be the most secure location on the station. Danny was quiet for a moment, thinking. Then he began to move toward the exit. "Where are you going?" Martinez called after him. "To get some fresh air," Danny replied. Which was obviously not true since they were on a space station. Martinez started to follow him. But Danny had already disappeared into the crowd of frightened people. She looked around frantically, but it was as if he had simply vanished into thin air. Danny moved through the corridors of Harmony Point like a ghost. Years of living quietly had taught him how to be invisible, how to move without being noticed. But now he was using those skills for a different purpose. He avoided the main hallways, where pirates might be patrolling, and instead used maintenance shafts and service corridors that most people forgot existed. His destination was Storage Bay, where he remembered seeing something during his first week at the academy. The storage bay was dark and filled with old equipment that the station no longer used. Danny made his way to the back corner, where a single crate sat covered by a dusty tarp. He pulled the tarp away to reveal a set of armor that looked very similar to what he had worn at Kepler's Edge. It was not the same suit, it's that one had been destroyed in the final explosion. But the Academy kept examples of different military equipment for training purposes, and someone had donated this prototype to their collection. Danny began putting on the armor pieces, his hands moving with practiced efficiency. The suit was slightly different from the one he remembered, but the basic design was the same. Enhanced strength, improved reflexes, and sensors that could track multiple targets at once. As the armor's systems came online, Danny felt a familiar sensation. Information began flowing directly into his brain, station layouts, enemy positions detected by remaining sensors, tactical assessments of the situation. It was like putting on a second skin that he had almost forgotten he owned. The pirates had made several mistakes in their planning, and they had disabled the main security systems. But they had not thought about the backup sensors hidden in the ventilation system. They had brought enough people to control the station, but they had spread themselves too thin trying to cover everything at once. Most importantly, they had no idea that one of the most dangerous humans alive was walking free in the corridors. Danny began his work. The first group of pirates never knew what hit them. They were guarding a junction that led to the diplomatic levels when their weapons simply stopped working. Danny had crawled through the ceiling and disabled their equipment with small devices that blocked electronic signals. When they tried to radio for help, Danny dropped down behind them. 3 seconds later, all 4 pirates were unconscious. On the floor, their armor intact, but their bodies gently sleeping thanks to pressure points that temporarily cut off. Blood flow to the brain. Danny moved on to the next group. By the time the pirates realized something was wrong, Danny had already disabled 2 more patrols and cleared a path to the diplomatic levels. He moved through the station like a force of nature, appearing and disappearing without warning. The pirates began to panic. Their carefully organized operation was falling apart, and they did not understand why. Guards posted at key locations stopped responding. Secure doors that should have stayed locked somehow opened by themselves. Weapons malfunctioned at exactly the wrong moments. In the safe zone, the students and faculty watched the security monitors in amazement. The cameras showed pirates running through corridors, looking over their shoulders in fear. Some of them seemed to be talking to empty air, as if they were seeing things that were not there. Commander Martinez stared at the screens and slowly began to smile. She recognized the tactical pattern even though she could not see who was implementing it. This was not random luck or equipment failure. This was the guardian of Kepler's Edge. Doing what he did best, the battle for Harmony Point Academy had begun. And for the first time since the emergency started, Martinez felt hope. In the corridors above, Danny Sullivan moved through shadow and silence, protecting the people he cared about in the only way he knew how. In the safe zone, the students and faculty watched the security monitors with growing amazement. The pirate attack that had seemed so terrifying an hour ago was turning into something completely different. Groups of armed invaders were being found unconscious in corridors, their weapons disabled, but their bodies unharmed. Secured doors that the pirates had locked were mysteriously opening to allow trapped diplomats to escape. Commander Martinez stood near the main monitor, watching footage from a hallway camera. A group of 5 pirates walked confidently down the corridor, weapons ready, talking to each other through their helmet communicators. Then, in the space between one frame and the next, all 5 collapsed to the floor simultaneously. "Is that possible?" whispered Professor Carolyn, his crystal form flickering with confusion. Martinez knew the answer, but she was not ready to share it yet. Instead, she watched as more impossible things happened on the screens around the room. 3. Levels up, Danny moved through Conference Room Alpha like a shadow. The diplomatic officials from 12 different worlds were huddled behind overturned tables while 6 pirates kept them covered with energy weapons. The pirates were nervous, constantly checking their communicators for orders that were no longer coming. Donnie had been watching them for 10 minutes, learning their patrol patterns and identifying the best approach. The armor sensors told him exactly where each pirate was looking at any given moment, making it easy to stay in their blind spots. He began with the guards stationed by the main door. Danny approached from behind, moving so quietly that his footsteps made no sound, even on the metal flooring. One gentle touch to the right spot on the guard's neck, and the pirate fell forward into unconsciousness. The other pirates did not notice. Their companions collapsed for almost 30 seconds. When they finally realized something was wrong, Danny was already moving toward the next target. "Check the door," called the leader, a scarred human wearing black armor. "Marcus, report." No response came from the unconscious guard. Danny used their confusion to disable 2 more pirates, appearing behind them like a ghost and sending them into peaceful sleep before they could cry out. By the time the remaining 3 pirates understood, they were under attack. Half their force was already gone. "Show yourself," shouted the leader, swinging his weapon around wildly. "We know you are in here." Danny stepped out from behind a pillar, his hands empty and his posture relaxed. To the pirates, he looked like just another student who had somehow gotten lost during the evacuation. "Please do not hurt them," Danny said quietly, nodding toward the diplomatic officials. "They are just here to talk about peace." Laughed harshly. "Peace? Kid, you picked the wrong day to play hero. Get down on the ground before I decide to use you as an example." Danny did not move. "I would rather you did not do that." "Oh, you would rather?" The pirate leader raised his weapon and pointed it directly at Danny's chest. "Too bad for you, kid. Say goodbye." He pulled the trigger. Nothing happened. The leader looked down at his weapon in confusion, then pulled the trigger again. Still nothing. The energy cell indicator showed a full charge, but the weapon refused to fire. "Mine too," called one of the other pirates, frantically checking his rifle. "Something is wrong with the guns?" Danny had been in the room long enough to plant small devices near each pirate's position. The devices created electromagnetic fields that disrupted the firing mechanisms of energy weapons, making them completely useless. "That is unfortunate," Danny said, still speaking in his quiet, polite voice. "Now, I am going to ask you nicely to surrender. Please put down your weapons and lie on the floor." The leader threw his useless rifle aside and pulled out a metal club. The other 2 pirates did the same, drawing knives and other close combat weapons. 3 against 1, kid? Even without guns, you do not have a chance. Danny sighed softly. "I really hoped we could do this the easy way." What happened next would be talked about in the academy for years to come. The pirate leader swung his club in a powerful arc aimed at Danny's head. Danny simply was not there when the weapon arrived. He had moved exactly 6 inches to the left, just enough for the club to whistle harmlessly past his ear. Before the leader could recover his balance, Danny's hand touched his wrist. The club fell from nerveless fingers as pressure points, temporarily paralyzed the pirate's arm. The second pirate lunged forward with a knife. But Danny caught his wrist and redirected the attack so that the pirate stumbled into his own leader. Both men crashed to the ground in a tangle of arms and legs. The third pirate tried to circle around behind Danny, but somehow Danny was already turning to face him before the man had even started moving. It was as if Danny could see the future, predicting every attack before it began. 30 seconds later, all 3 pirates were lying unconscious on the floor. Danny knelt down and began checking each unconscious pirate to make sure they were breathing properly. The diplomatic officials stared at him in shock and amazement. "Are you all right?" Danny asked them, his voice returning to its normal quiet tone. No one was hurt? Ambassador Veltar of the Zephyrian Empire clicked her mandibles in. What might have been laughter or disbelief. "Young human, what is your name?" "Danny Sullivan, ma'am." "I am a student here at the academy." "Danny Sullivan," she repeated slowly. "I think we will all remember that name." Meanwhile, in the safe zone, the security monitors were showing the aftermath of Danny's rescue mission. Camera after camera revealed unconscious pirates lying peacefully in corridors, their weapons scattered, but their bodies unharmed. Not a single pirate appeared to be seriously injured, despite the fact that their entire operation had been completely destroyed. The students watching the screens were beginning to understand that something extraordinary had happened. Not the work of the Academy's security force or some kind of mechanical malfunction. Someone had single-handedly defeated 200 armed pirates without killing or permanently harming any of them. Crystal-esque crystal form was flickering through colors so rapidly that she looked like a rainbow strobe light. "This is impossible," she whispered. "No one could do this alone." Nebula floated beside her, speaking through her translator device. Perhaps it is not impossible. Perhaps we simply do not understand what humans are truly capable of. Next. Clicked his mandibles thoughtfully. Do you think Danny was telling the truth? Could he really be the guardian of Kepler's Edge? Before anyone could answer, the main doors to the safe zone opened, and the diplomatic officials began filing in. Escorted by Academy security officers, they looked shaken, but unharmed, talking excitedly to each other in a dozen different languages. Behind them walked Danny Sullivan, still wearing the prototype armor, but carrying his helmet under his arm. His brown hair was messy, and his face showed signs of fatigue, but he was smiling slightly. The entire safe zone fell silent as he entered. Hundreds of beings from dozens of different worlds stared at the quiet human student who had somehow saved them all. Commander Martinez pushed through the crowd to reach Danny. "Are you hurt?" she asked. "No, ma'am. A few bumps and bruises, but nothing serious." "And the pirates?" "All sleeping peacefully. They should wake up in a few hours with nothing worse than headaches." Danny paused and looked around at all the faces watching him. "I tried to be gentle." Martinez realized that everyone in the room was listening to their conversation. The secret of Danny's identity was about to become very public knowledge. "Danny," she said carefully, "I think it is time to tell everyone who you really are." Danny looked around the room at his fellow students. He saw Crystal S. flickering crystal form, Nebula S. purple gas cloud, and Zaketh insectoid features. These were his friends, people who had shared meals with him and helped him with homework. "My name is Danny Sullivan," he said, his quiet voice somehow carrying to every corner of the room. "I am 21 years old. I come from New Montana, and 3 years ago, I was the guardian of Kepler's Edge." The silence that followed was different from the disbelief of 3 days ago. This time, everyone believed him, and for the first time, since arriving at the academy, Danny felt like he could finally be himself. 6 months had passed since the pirate attack on Harmony Point Academy. The story had spread across the galaxy faster than anyone expected. News networks from every major world carried the tale of Danny Sullivan, the quiet student who turned out to be the legendary guardian of Kepler's Edge. But life at the academy had settled into a new normal. And in many ways, Danny was still the same person he had always been. He still sat in the back of classrooms, still borrowed notes from other students, and still apologized when he thought he was taking up too much space. The difference was that now everyone knew why he was so quiet, and they respected him for it rather than overlooking him. "Danny, could you help me with this tactical problem?" asked Crystal one morning in the library. Her crystal form was flickering with frustrated colors as she stared at her data pad. "Sure," Danny replied, moving to look over her shoulder. "What is the situation? You have to plan a rescue mission for hostages being held in an underground facility. Cannot figure out the best approach route." Donnie studied the holographic display for a moment. "Well, you could go through the main entrance, but that would be heavily guarded. Or you could try the ventilation system, but that might be too narrow for a full team. So what would you do?" Danny smiled. "I would ask the hostages to rescue themselves." "What do you mean?" "Look here." Danny pointed to a section of the facility layout. "There is a maintenance tunnel that runs right under the holding cells. If you could get a message to the hostages and provide them with basic tools, they could break through the floor and escape on their own. Then your rescue team just needs to be waiting at the exit point." Crystal S. crystal form brightened with understanding. "That way we avoid most of the guards completely, and the hostages are already moving to safety before the enemy even knows what is happening." "Exactly. Sometimes the best way to solve a problem is to let other people solve it." For you, this had become typical of Danny's approach to everything at the academy. While other students focused on overwhelming force or complex strategies, Danny always looked for solutions that avoided unnecessary conflict. His professors had noticed this change in how he thought about military problems. Commander Martinez had asked him about it during a private meeting the month before. "Danny, your tactical suggestions are always focused on minimizing casualties and avoiding direct confrontation. Is this because of what happened at Kepler's Edge?" Danny had considered the question carefully before answering. "I learned something important during that battle, Commander. I am very good at hurting people. may be too good. But being able to destroy something does not mean you should. The real challenge is figuring out how to protect people without having to hurt anyone else. This philosophy had begun to influence other students as well. Danny never lectured anyone or tried to change their minds directly, but his quiet example was powerful. When the most famous warrior in recent history chose diplomacy over violence, people paid attention. Zuck had been particularly affected by Danny's approach. The insectoid student had grown up in a culture that valued strength and aggression above all else, but watching Danny work had shown him that true strength sometimes meant choosing not to fight. "I used to think humans were impressive because you could win any battle," Zack had told Danny one day. "Now I think you are impressive because you try not to fight battles in the first place." Danny had just smiled and changed the subject, as he always did when people tried to praise him. The academy had also changed in other ways, since Danny's identity became known. Applications from human students had increased dramatically, with young people from across human space wanting to learn from the guardian of Kepler's Edge. But Danny treated all of them the same way he treated. In gentle guidance, he had started an unofficial study group that met twice a week in one of the smaller classrooms. Students from every species were welcome, and Danny helped them with whatever subjects they were struggling with. The sessions were always calm and patient, with Danny explaining complex concepts in simple terms that everyone could understand. "Key to understanding orbital mechanics," Danny would say, "is to remember that everything is always falling. Planets fall around stars, moons fall around planets, and spacecraft fall around everything. We just make sure they fall in the right direction." His teaching style was as gentle as everything else about him. He never made students feel stupid for asking questions, and he always found ways to relate difficult topics to things they already understood. The diplomatic officials who had been rescued during the pirate attack had not forgotten Danny either. Several governments had offered him high-ranking positions in their military forces, but Danny had politely declined all of them. "I am still learning," he would tell them. "There is more I need to understand before I am ready to help in that way." What he was learning, his professors realized, was how to be a peacemaker instead of a warrior. His final thesis project was a comprehensive study of conflict resolution techniques used by different species throughout the galaxy. The paper was quietly brilliant, analyzing how various cultures approached disagreements and finding common patterns that could be used to prevent wars before they started. Professor Carolyn, who was supervising the project, had called it the most important work he had seen in 30 years of teaching. "This young human has figured out something that has taken most civilizations centuries to learn," Carolyn told Commander Martinez. "True victory comes not from defeating your enemies, but from turning them into friends." As graduation day approached, everyone wondered what Danny would choose to do next. The offers kept coming: military commands, diplomatic positions, teaching jobs at prestigious universities. But Danny kept them all waiting while he made his decision. The graduation ceremony was held in the main assembly hall with representatives from dozens of worlds in attendance. Students from every species walked across the stage to receive their commissions and assignments. When Danny's name was called, the entire hall fell silent. He walked to the podium with the same quiet confidence he had always shown, wearing a simple dress uniform with no special decorations. Commander Martinez handed him his diploma and shook his hand. "So Danny, have you decided what you want to do with your life?" Danny smiled and looked out at the audience filled with aliens, humans, diplomats, and military officers. His fellow students sat in the front rows, watching him with respect and affection. "I want to be a diplomat," he said, his quiet voice carrying clearly through the hall. "But not the kind who sits in offices and signs papers. I want to be the kind who goes to places where people are angry at each other and helps them remember why they should be friends instead." The silence that followed was different from any that had come before. It was not the silence of shock or disbelief, but the silence of deep respect. Everyone in the hall understood that they were witnessing something special, a warrior who had chosen to become a peacemaker. The applause, when it finally came, was thunderous. Later that evening at the graduation party, Danny sat with his friends from different worlds. Crystal S. crystal form glowed with warm colors. Nebula floated contentedly in her tank, and Zack clicked his mandibles in what passed for laughter among his people.
So, where will your first diplomatic assignment take you?
asked Nebula.
A place called the Frontier Zone, Danny replied. There are some mining disputes between human colonies and Ravager settlements. Both sides are getting ready to fight, but I think they just need someone to help them talk to each other. The Ravagers. Crystal S colors shifted to worried patterns. Danny, those are the same people who attacked your home world? Danny nodded calmly. I know. It is exactly why I need to go there. If I can learn to make peace with them, then anyone can make peace with anyone. His friends looked at him with amazement. Here was someone who had every reason to hate the Ravagers, choosing instead to help them solve their problems peacefully. As the party continued around them, Danny looked up through the viewing windows. At the stars beyond, tomorrow, he would begin a new chapter of his life. Using the same skills that had made him a legendary warrior to become something even more important, he would become a guardian of peace instead of a guardian of war, and somehow, that felt like the most human thing he could possibly do.